Hey there, welcome to episode 8 of the Quaggling Sand audio program, recording on the morning of January 3rd in this new year, 2024. It's a little bit rainy outside, great time to record a podcast. Although I did write all my various notes and outlines last night on the 2nd. I was too tired. Long day commuting around southern Nevada, the greater Vegas area. Apropos, perhaps? Maybe. Today's episode, Car-Free Carefree, the adventures through southern Nevada without a car. Before we get started, for those who haven't heard this before, every once in a while I retell the very brief story. Quaggling Sand is the term, the label, the name, the technical description of what you might call pins and needles. It's that the numbness that begins then to return in a limb, usually hand, foot, etc. The tingling as circulation returns after you've been sitting on your hand or foot or something like that. I came up with this term when I was about maybe 3 or 4 years old, I think, according to my notes. And to me, it's a good way to characterize a collection of random things, circulation returning to the memory cells in the telling of stories and the conclusions reached. So I learned how to drive when I was 10. I was driving my grandparents they actually had 2 Toyota Corolla vehicles. I was driving around a small red hatchback. So that puts the year probably in the 60s of the vehicle. I should look that up someday. Stick shift, of course. I was 10. We used to drive around the circle. My grandparents lived on a circular drive, Turtle Dove Circle, in fact, in Punta Gorda, Florida. When I would visit in the summer, had an opportunity to learn how to drive a car. Stick shift, driving around, driving through the streets of a development of homes for older folks. Most of the homes were not built, so I was essentially driving around empty community streets. Pretty uneventful, but I did learn how to drive, which was nice. And since then, I always leaned towards a standard transmission, driving stick, as we used to say. Sort of fallen out of favor in recent years, but that's how I learned. Let's do a couple of quick links in the show notes that will come up through today's episode. First of all, my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo link and ko-fi.com coffee, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You can tip out if you are interested in supporting the show and buy me a coffee. Funds go towards purchase of beans and other coffee making accoutrements. But in the meantime, buy me a coffee. I also post links to the projects I'm working on. I will say I've been trying to edit my Buy Me a Coffee profile, and I have found many, many, many issues with their online editor tool. Doesn't lay out really well at all on what you see, so I apologize for that. But it's a convenient stopping point on your way to figuring out what new episodes of which new podcasts or audio programs or other such things, GitHub repositories, and so on. So I keep that up to date. I used to keep it more up to date, and now I am doing that once again. So you check that out, and the Ko-fi, ko-fi site. I need to figure out how that really works. I mean, I know how it kind of works, but what's the best way to take advantage of that? And as well, now that I don't really post on LinkedIn anymore, really got to have the Quaggling Sand website back up so we can self-publish, have things look the way that we want, we being me, myself, and I. And a few more links. There's a real problem in the southern Nevada, the greater Vegas area, about automobile-related crimes in general. I have an article from later in 2023. It refers to an article in the summer of 2023 about car theft. Cars are getting stolen left and right. I live in the Centennial Hills area in the north part of the city of Las Vegas proper. I see, if you happen to be using Nextdoor, which I will not link to, it's a horrible website. It's a horrible thing. But it is an interesting place to see the essentially daily mentions of car broken into, car stolen, catalytic converter stolen, although that doesn't happen as much. I think they just take the whole car. Tools stolen. People often leave their tools if they're a tradesperson. They'll leave a collection of very expensive tools in their work truck. So if the truck is still there, sometimes a window is broken out. Or my favorite, don't forget to lock your door. People are always wandering around neighborhoods. You will see Ring camera footage in our new surveillance state. People wandering down streets trying doors. So it's a problem. I've had no car in Vegas since 2016 when I sold my Scion XB. I wrote a Medium post about it 1 year after, in 2017. I think it was December. So I've linked to that. My no car, I wrote no VAR. Let me correct that. No car Vegas 1 year in. And my Medium collection of articles, there's a bunch of stuff on there too if you want to check any of those out. So yeah, one year. I usually refer to my situation as car and then a square bracket with an E. So the title of this episode, Car Free Carefree, I normally write that as one. It wouldn't make sense to the casual observer, but as if car and care are the same, free. So it's been generally a positive thing. Although yesterday morning I did have to catch a bus at 6 a.m. in order to reach a place by 8 a.m. that if I had driven a car or if I had paid about 7 times more, I could have had a rideshare driver take me. And but yeah, to get there in 2 hours for about a 20-minute drive, maybe 30 minutes, maybe. Morning traffic can maybe add to that, but yeah, 2 hours. So it was a long day yesterday because I also had to get back, and I actually ventured onto the Strip, but it's actually quite doable. So we'll cover some of that today. I was a witness to a fatal car crash in Ireland, and you can read the article about that. It was a very sad situation. It was a very sorry series of events that took place, and it's very unfortunate. It was a weird thing to see when you travel abroad. Now, today, this won't sound so crazy. The world is an even more crazy place than it was. But you would think when you're traveling, I was traveling for work, but you're out of your element. You're in a different place. It's weird to have such real life events turn so near. So I'll talk about that a little bit. But it's sort of it's a reflection on how when you're not the car driver, I was a passenger in a vehicle. It's a very different situation when things like this happen. You end up, or I ended up, being completely, strangely aware of what was happening, rather than being aware of how to avoid, what was my car doing while circumstances leading up to it and the actual turn of events as they unfolded specifically, and then moving away from what had happened. So it was an interesting evening, to say the least, and very unfortunate for the woman that was killed, the young woman. I don't know if she's named in that article, but I believe they named her the next day. Very sad. And then a quick note on the 15-Minute City with a link to the 15minutecity.com website. So let's begin. I mentioned I learned how to drive the Toyota Corolla. Toyota has did have a great transmission for any car with a standard transmission. The stick shift, driving stick, as I said, whether in a car or even probably arguably even more forgiving and easy to learn on is the Toyota pickup trucks from many years ago. I don't know about the 4-wheel drive, the bigger vehicles, the Tacoma and so on. But your classic old Toyota pickup truck with the bent stick and the little rubber boot on the bottom, at the base of the stick, on the drivetrain hump in the car, made for easy shifting, easy learning. I don't know if you can hear my phone ringing. How dare they call during my audio program recording session? And I hate that ringtone. All right, it stopped. I'll call them back. So the Toyota car, though, very similar. I think it had the same rubber boot, in fact, in that particular model year. Very, very easy to shift. The clutch was very reasonable, not too heavy. I'm sure I probably stalled it a couple times, but essentially as a 10-year-old, I was very comfortable driving stick. I've never driven a Prius, by the way. I've been in a Prius, but I've never driven a Prius or really any EV. So I don't know how the new age of automatic, maybe they're even continuous. I don't know if they're continuously variable transmissions at this point. But so my experience with the Toyota way back when, very useful, very educational. And I personally came to believe that when you drive stick, when you're driving and you are controlling the transmission directly rather than allowing it to shift automatically, you have a better sense of the car. You have to pay attention a little bit more. You have a better feel for when you are going to accelerate and you want to downshift, or, it's just, and in fact, learning how to drive stick, my method whenever I had tried to teach anyone, and especially in high school, I used to have them practice going up a hill, obviously parking, shifting back, reverse, first, second, reverse, back and forth, parallel parking, or other tight negotiations. Clearly, you don't want to stall your car when you're coming out of a red light, blocking traffic and so on. So after practicing with people as I was showing them how to drive, and by the way, if in the future you find yourself trying to describe how a manual transmission works, I came to describe it as an Oreo cookie. When you push the clutch pedal in, you would force apart the chocolate cookies, and the clutch plate, the creamy center, would spin freely. So when you let the clutch out, the cookie would grab the cream, and they would spin together. Anyway, so after practicing and driving around mall parking lots and so on, I would take my student for a coffee. No, we were too young for that. We would go for an ice cream cone, in fact, and I would have them bring their ice cream cone to the car. We would get in the car, and I would have them eat their ice cream cone while driving stick with an ice cream cone, and even better if it was melting. And I would have them hold on an incline, so have the car, stay in one position, roll back a little bit, try to roll back forward up the hill, and generally operate the vehicle with the distraction and one-handedness that is a real life situation. So I used to drive stick all the time and try to help others do the same. I think we've moved away from that. I remember I was visiting Eindhoven, Holland the first time. This was back in 2000. Yeah, 2000-ish. We rented a car. It was myself and my coworker. And they looked at me and said, is it okay? I'm not doing a Dutch accent. Let's pretend they speak English, because they do. Is it okay that it's a standard transmission? Are you able to drive it? Because they, in their experience, found most Americans did not either know how or care to drive a standard transmission. So it's still a good life skill, although probably less useful than being able to record a TikTok video. But I still think it keeps you in touch with the vehicle and the driving experience a little bit more than an automatic transmission does. I eventually had a Volkswagen Bug, a Beetle. It was a 1970 Volkswagen Beetle. It was used. My parents said, you need to be able to get around and not rely on other people for rides and so on. I would eventually, I think I did have a job at that point. I had a job at McDonald's, which everyone should have a job at a fast food restaurant at some point in their life. That's another episode, another time. So I had my job. I was putting away the big dollars, $3.25, I think, $3.15, I think was the minimum wage. And I, at some point, had worked my way up to like $3.95 an hour. Crazy. So I was banking that. I eventually would buy a modem, which I've talked about in a previous episode, a 1200 baud Mitsuba. And then eventually I would put the rest of that money into my Volkswagen Beetle gas tank, when regular gasoline was, I remember, 79 cents a gallon. Good times. So I would drive around town, mostly go to work. So I'd drive to school, drive to work, drive home. Every once in a while, I would go out somewhere. Also good times. Obviously, it had a standard transmission. The automatic stick shift models were available later, Super Beetles. But I had just a regular old Volkswagen 1970 Beetle. I did put in a new engine and some other stuff. It was a very good learning experience. Maintaining a car, getting under the car, adjusting valves, timing, and so on. So it was a good experience in general. Then I went off to college, didn't have a car for 4 years. I used to walk everywhere. Some people did have a car. My good friend and eventual suite mate. We were in a suite that shared bathrooms with individual rooms in a college dorm on the Harvey Mudd campus. He had I cannot remember the year, but he had a Volkswagen bus. So he used to somehow put up with everybody piling in, and we would all go for Thai food or other adventures. Del Taco especially was another one, Taco Tuesday. So it was fun to be able to get out and about, but it was also a massive relief to not have to deal with a car. Just the upkeep, the general expenses. I did have work-study jobs on campus. I tutored kids in elementary school and math and so on. So it was nice, though, to be able to put that money towards books and pizza now and then, and, of course, my Thai food habit and so on. So I would eventually graduate, though, and I moved up to Silicon Valley in around 1993. And, of course, to get around, I leased, because I didn't really have any money, student loans, gotta love it. And I was making the amazing sum of $15 an hour at my first job at Supermac Technologies. So I leased a new car, a Jetta 3, white. Not an amazing car, but a fine car. It was completely usable. Stick shift, of course, standard transmission. It was a good driving experience. People who drove it did find it very drivable, very nice. It was not a pretty car. I think it looked a little weird. It had very small rims. I think they were 14-inch. Just had a weird. It was no Cybertruck. It was not an Aztec. Pontiac Aztec, probably even uglier than the Cybertruck. But it was an odd, but it definitely got me around. It did get broken into. They stole my Newton Message Pad 100 and my HP 48G calculator and my bag with a bunch of CDs in it, my like shoulder bag. See, if I had not had a car, I would still have those things. I had several Volkswagen products, including a diesel Jetta, which was probably my favorite car. I had a GTI with a 6-cylinder engine in it, so it had a lot of power for such a small vehicle. I did have, for my final choice, a Scion XB, the square body, the old body style. Probably the most utilitarian vehicle, although the diesel Jetta did get the most ridiculous mileage. It was a 90 horsepower version, so the most amazing mileage you could ever hope for in a very, very comfortable. It was a late, I think it was 2002, later model at the time, not late now. Very comfortable, very easy to drive diesel vehicle. Back in the old days when getting diesel meant quite often stopping in at a truck stop and putting fuel into your vehicle at rates that only a 100-gallon fuel tank could truly appreciate. So that was fun. I would also get strange looks from the attendants. Hey, this is that's diesel, right? Yeah, you have a car. So it was still new back then, relatively new. But the XB was my final choice, and it was the car I would eventually sell, which I mentioned earlier, here in Vegas. And I have since adopted a pedestrian or borrowed vehicle lifestyle. And generally speaking, I'm glad I did. I did used to drive on the freeways quite a bit. While I had cars, I mentioned the VWs, the diesel VW, great for road trips. But I would take a quick trip down to LA from the SF Bay Area to do an errand, perhaps. I had done more than once a 13-hour round trip to, which is crazy, to conduct various business and then get back on the road, go back home. So if you leave around midnight, you get back just after lunch, you're all good. I did like flying. I liked flying. I liked flying just fine, but I did prefer driving to flying. I had convinced myself that having a car when you get there, and you can leave when you want to, and you can bring whatever you want. You can throw all your stuff in your car and just drive to wherever, and flying is so much overhead and rigmarole and extra cost. That would change with my world travel job that I had with Intel Corporation. But I, until then, really preferred to be able to drive straight through to my destination, minimal stopping. The diesel Jetta made for very long distances between needs to refuel, which was very nice. So yeah, I used to definitely enjoy driving. So I'm not anti-driving. I'm just anti-car ownership at this point for me. I used to travel around the world, as I said, for Intel. My XB here in Nevada. So that's the only car I had in Nevada. So I drove it from the Silicon Valley, when I moved in 2013 to here in Vegas, it would sit quite a bit. The last time before I sold it, it had sat for 7 months. Everything had expired. I had to get the smog check. I had to get the registration renewed. I had to obviously renew insurance, which, wasn't driving it, had lapsed. Battery was dead. And it was sitting in an apartment parking lot. It wasn't even in a garage or anything. Never broken into, never molested. Something magical perhaps about that vehicle? Not sure. Because today, I don't know if that would have held up. Dark forces have taken over. Probably wouldn't have made it. Although I also didn't really keep anything in the car. I didn't have valuables, tools, laptops, purses, piles of money. So interesting. But when I would travel, I would occasionally do the long-term, I would do short-term parking, but I would park for the weekend at the airport in my XB. So I could throw my one roller bag or something into the back. Plenty of room. Get to the airport, park, go back home. So it's 2-3 days sitting at the airport. Convenient. However, as I started traveling on longer intervals, as in I would go to Ireland for 5 weeks, or I would go to Rome for a couple weeks, or I'd go to France, or I'd go Toulouse, in fact, or around the country, or to Intel sites, or whatever I was doing. So not always practical to leave my car, although I could have expensed it, so not a big deal. But I used to take rideshare choices, so I would take preferred Lyft. Still do, really, although it's been a while. But I used to also take the bus, which I used to get a laugh when I would submit my expense reports. Like, what is this, $2 to the airport? So I could get to the airport for $2. Didn't have to deal with a car, didn't have to deal with waiting on a rideshare vehicle, and so on. So I was creative on the departure side sometimes. But when I would travel, rather than renting a car, especially because oftentimes for hackathons, I would be in a particular city, arrive Thursday night or Friday morning. Hackathon would be Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, leave Sunday night or Monday morning. Not really a lot of room for driving around. So why rent a car and have it sitting? Also, why do I have to learn where things are? Why do I have to figure out which turn to make, where the parking lot is, and so on? And then finally, even more practical, I suppose, hackathons, you're tending to be awake a lot. So if I happen to have stayed awake for 40 hours, I certainly don't want to be in a position where I have to drive, unnecessary risk to get to the airport to head home. So infinitely easier to get rideshare in those cases. But when I was traveling to Ireland, Toulouse, I should say Dublin, or more correctly and exactly, Leixlip, where the Intel facility is, Toulouse, France, Rome, and including also Turin, where the Arduino offices are. I would take the subway, the light rail, the bus, the walking. I used to walk around Dublin all the time. That was great. Same with Toulouse, although Toulouse did have a subway to get to the Intel site there. So I'd take a little subway, sort of light rail subway thing. And that worked out great. Now you don't have to concern yourself with learning a whole different language, and in Ireland, a whole different side of the road to drive on. And I didn't have to concern myself with safety issues or keeping track of cars and where to park and what the rules of the road were and dealing with pedestrians. And of course, I alluded to that awful story. Forget about it if I was driving. Like, am I even on the right side of the road? So I learned a lot, and I found, as I mentioned earlier, driving stick, you are in touch with your driving, the process of driving, the need for shifting keeps you in tune with the road and the movement of your car and others. When you remove that and you're in a different place, a different country, then I could jump on a subway, a light rail, a bus, a train, maybe a Lyft or Uber or the equivalent, and occasionally a taxi cab even. And I could actually see the world as I was traveling through it, rather than trying to negotiate roads and traffic and street signs and cultural expectations on the road, when to curse and to whom, etc. That was fun in Rome, by the way. It was like being in New York, only more Italian. So I learned quite a bit about why I don't necessarily feel the need to drive. I don't have the calling to be free and travel. I was already in another country. I got the job. So now I could enjoy, and plus when you take things like bus or public transportation, buses and trains, you can sometimes interact with the people. Sometimes someone would ask, "Oh, you're from America, or you're here visiting, or what are you getting into today, or this and that." So you could kind of get a feel for it. It's like hanging out at a pub or a coffee shop in a different city or country. Similar deal, right? You are seeing the people of the place. You are not trying to avoid hitting a car in front of you. So I really grew to appreciate this notion of connecting a little bit more. Plus, you have to figure out when the bus or the train is coming. I used to book a hotel. It used to be called the North Star. Now it's been renamed on the north side, of course, by the Connolly station in Dublin. So I had to catch the train and go to Leixlip. And so I'd get off the train, and then I'd have to walk about a mile-ish to the Intel site. If I didn't catch the shuttle only ran until a certain hour. So if I caught the 9:08 train or the 8:07, whatever it was in the morning, I think I would miss the last shuttle because for some reason they didn't care for people getting to work anything but earlier than necessary. But anyway, so I'd catch a little morning walk, but having to align my schedule with the train, with the shuttle, with I can't remember the name of the light rail that's also in Dublin. So I would catch all these things. I caught a train from Cork to Dublin, jumped on that light rail to get to my near my hotel, the North Star. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for when you're visiting foreign places or other places. It's I think it's useful to not be overly concerned with tracking a vehicle. You should be enjoying your visit. Let other people do the driving. Isn't that Greyhound or something? Let us do the driving, something like that. That's also another episode, cross country which I've alluded to in a previous episode. And plus my car was always in Vegas. So I would get home and I would either drive from the airport or I would get home and I would have my car. So I would jump in the car and go get groceries or something. And it started to become apparent in the couple of years that I was doing this, that do I really need this car? Because I'm paying insurance and taking the risk of theft and other car crimes while I'm away. And I use it for, and I'm not even kidding, and I'm almost embarrassed. I would drive from my apartment to the grocery store. I can walk. Now, this is where I used to live. I could walk to the grocery store in about 15 minutes and actually get some walking in. 15 or 10. I think it was 10. May have been 10. 10 or 15. I think it was 0.62 miles, if I recall correctly. So, and now I live directly across the street from that very same grocery store. So it makes no sense to drive a mile or less. So why do I have a car when I can get to all the things I need day to day for the cost of some shoe rubber and 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes? So the value proposition of owning and maintaining a car and all the risks associated with the crimes that could be committed on it really dropped off. Diminishing returns, to say the least. What I have learned since selling my car in, what year did I say? 2016, 17, 16, I think it was. What I've learned is that the city of Las Vegas and the greater Vegas area, not really pedestrian. I live in the suburbs. I lived and still do really, lived near a elementary school. So every day, school day, there'd be the pickup line. So school speed limits, which I think in Vegas are 65. There were plenty of cars coming and going, and what I've learned is that people do not understand that pedestrians are breakable. I'm going to say about once a week, come closer than I'd like to being struck by a moving vehicle, crossing a street especially. There are very many unsafe intersections all around. People do get hit by cars here quite often. Mostly the car, from what I've seen, the car's fault, I was going to say, but the drivers are not necessarily paying attention, or they are in such a rush. This happens to me all the time. Someone will be making a left turn especially, and then they notice that someone's in the crosswalk, so then they slam on the brakes or they apologize. Oh, I'm really sorry. Okay. Thank you for stopping, I guess. Sorry for being in the crosswalk. Crossing with the light. I'm legal. Anyway, it's not a pedestrian city, though. The city is spread out. It's sprawling. In fact, if you've ever been to Los Angeles, you really need a car to get around LA because it's freeways connecting very widely spread cities, and you really sometimes need to get to West Covina, but then you got to go to Pomona, and then you got to go to where else? San Bernardino. You got to zip around different parts of the greater Los Angeles. LA County is a big place. Clark County is also a big place. There are cities that are designed for either pedestrian or short hop, so you can jump on a trolley, cable car. In San Francisco, you can jump on BART, of course. You can take one of their minibuses. It's easy to do short hops. If you're in Manhattan, you can just walk. You can walk from any tip of any part of Manhattan to the other, across, vertically, north-south. Plenty to do along the way, but it is definitely a city oriented towards pedestrians. You can always take a taxi. You'll probably beat the taxi if you walk, depending on what time it is. Vegas is not that. Vegas is most definitely geared for people with cars. You can get around on a bicycle. You will face some of the same challenges that pedestrians do. My dad was a motorcycle rider. It's been a while since he has done so, but he would always tell us, when you are riding a motorcycle, you must convince yourself, believe to your core that every other driver on the road is proactively attempting to kill you. I feel that is true here, bicyclists and pedestrians alike. So people, and in fact, bicyclists will also almost hit pedestrians. I've nearly been struck by moving bicycles. Bicyclists tend to, there's a perfectly good bicycle lane. In fact, I have now taken to saying, should I be in the bike lane? Because they like to ride their bicycles very quickly on the sidewalk where the people are. At least they're not driving cars on there as often. But things are very spread out. So getting around, you really have to rely on public transit if you do not have a car. And if you got to get to work or to school or to the hospital or see your parents or visit somebody or get to the airport, of course, you must account for the simple, like, oh, there's another detour because of road construction. Oh, there's a sporting event taking place. That rules. So all getting to work. I bumped into the microphone, so I'll probably edit out the square wave peak since I clipped. Anyway, people got to get to work. People got to get to school, but construction rules. So a lot of detours, but also our Regional Transit Commission in Southern Nevada does not appear to enforce very strictly the notion that buses should appear close to their scheduled times. Very frequently, I mentioned I had to get up early yesterday morning. Very frequently, the bus that I was going to catch at 6:06 a.m., I think it was, that bus in particular has been known to simply not show up. We have an awful application they use here called Transit App. It's developed in Montreal. They don't care either, but they do make use of telemetry data that is captured and republished by a company called Swiftly in California. There's no data for this bus until moments before it's about to arrive. Like, oh, I guess it is going to show up. I can see it on the map and it's moving. That means live telemetry is being massaged into some user interface. And it's sort of it's a fun way to plan your day when you're not sure. In order for me to get where I needed to be by 8 a.m., I would either have to catch this bus at 6:06, I think it was, 6:05. Say it was 6:06. Why not? Or I could have caught another bus about 10 to 15 minutes walking, so about a mile, in the other direction. So I could walk to the transit center where the 606 bus would be, the CX South, if you're curious. Or I could walk in the other direction at 5:45 and catch a bus that would take just as long or even a little bit longer. It would go in the wrong direction for a period of time in order to get to where I was going. I think I would get there 20 minutes later, still before 8 a.m. So I had a nice margin of error on either side. But the fact is this, I had to commit to one of those buses and no telemetry data for the 606 bus as usual. And that's the bus that would sometimes not show up. So luckily telemetry was reporting with just enough time to make that call. So I did catch my bus. But the fact is I had to catch a bus at 6 a.m. to arrive 20 to 30 minutes of car travel because the routing is, so the complaint is if a city wants to have a public transit system, they should try to make it usable or don't pretend. And we are a city of a great many visitors. Myself, traveling the world, I have been a visitor to other cities. If I were to come to Vegas, and by the way, I have talked to people who do so, I would get here and say, woo, the bus system here is really not fun. And that's being kind. I often hear from people, in fact, during my meeting that I did arrive to very early. The bus actually got me the 3 buses. That's another fun part. The 3 buses I had to catch. One of those buses is not scheduled. It is the Deuce. If you've ever come to Vegas and you see the double-decker bus on the Strip, the Deuce has no specific schedule. So if you catch it at a particular time, you just happened upon it, you win. It may run. You can sometimes see the buses passing each other on the Strip because they don't have to have a scheduled time. So they can race. They can be completely filled, standing room only, and worse. They can be completely empty. You never know. So I did arrive at my destination early. One of the people that was there for this gathering, when we were talking about this, suggested that I should get a car. You should get a car. Just get a car. It's so nice to be able to jump in your car and get places. What you miss out on, though, is the wariness, the connection to the way the world works. So I think the net win is in my favor. The thing also, I mentioned the crime, I don't have to have a car every month, every day of every month, and face the consequences of car theft, car burglary, other such things, for the sake of getting to a coffee shop meetup once a month. So it's the math doesn't work. You should get a car is a silly argument, but it is based on the typical preferences. And I think once people realize that you can get around, you can do 2 things. One, you can stop worrying about paying for parking and having your car broken into and your things stolen. Those go out the window, the broken window sometimes. So you can spend your time and money and attention on other things. The other thing, if you don't have a car in Vegas, what was I going to say? I totally spaced. You will get a better appreciation for what works and what does not in a place like Vegas. So you can really feel personally when a bus doesn't show up or when a route is detoured and stops are not properly updated. And unfortunately, I know way too much about how the system works because we have a open transit platform we're working on as part of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. That's another episode entirely on a whole different audio program. But once you start paying attention, rather than saying, oh, I've never been on the bus, you say to yourself, or to others, oh yeah, I ride the bus all the time, and here are the real problems. Don't think of it as complaining. Think of it as trying to get to work or school, and a service for which you pay seems actively bent on helping you avoid that. That is the Southern Nevada Regional Transit Commission. So personally, my view, so Las Vegas thinks and wants to have you think that it is a smart city. And I think a smart city should be people-centric. That is the reason to have a city and not necessarily car-centric. That's a reason to have roads. But the fact is, if you are only concerned with streets and traffic and you are not paying attention to what people need to accomplish in your smart city, you may be convinced that tearing up roads every day is the way to go. I would suggest myself that people being able to get around doesn't necessarily depend on individuals having a car and driving on roads that are continuously under construction, but more so on the people actually being able to get around. And you can actually transport, I don't want to turn this into a woke fest of public transit, but you can get a lot of people around in one vehicle, and with better routing, which they haven't tackled yet here in Vegas, you can actually get them there on time or early without having to travel 2 hours to make a 20-minute trip. The getting around should be the thing that enables what you're trying to do. It should not be the task itself. I need to get to work. I got to figure out if the bus that I need to take every day is going to show up at the scheduled time more than half the time. That becomes another full-time job. Part-time, anyway. So we have very poor transit options here in Vegas, and we have tons of construction. So getting from A to B and then B to A later, it is going from A to B in Vegas is a trip through all of the alphabet. And it is tiring. The 15-minute city is one notion. If you read that article, or if you read the website, but there are articles about, it's really about being able to get around. If you live in the suburbs, you may live in a variation of a 15-minute city like planning. For example, I think I mentioned this. I live across the street from my grocery store. So I can walk to the grocery store. It probably takes me longer to get out of the building that I live in than to get across the street and into the grocery store. So that's very convenient. If I need to go to a library, I can jump on a bus. I think it's about a 7-minute bus ride, or I could walk. It'd be a little bit longer, but I could walk to the library. I could walk to most conveniences that one would need on a day-to-day basis if you're lucky enough to be able to work from home. This is a pretty decent setup if you don't have to bring kids to or from school, even more so. So I would very much like to see more thinking in the 15-minute city mindset. If you can actually get around and not have to have a car, if you think about New York, some of the various boroughs of New York, Manhattan I mentioned, Brooklyn. If you're in San Francisco, you can get around pretty easily without a car. You can jump on the cable cars. You can take BART. You can take Muni buses. You can jump on Caltrain. I used to ride Caltrain all the time. If you're in Vegas or LA or many, many other places, you probably need a car if you are faced with the challenge of getting to work that is not near a bus line, which is many places. The Open Transit project I mentioned came out of this desire to improve what we have, or do not have, here in Vegas by people who actually ride the bus. So what I have found is that people who complain about the bus or who think the bus is just fine don't use it, and so they have no idea. If you are car-free, as I am, in a place like this, you're a second-class citizen. You don't have a car. You're not paying for parking, so meh. And that needs to change. I think most of the 40 million people who visit Vegas, the greater Vegas area, each year, tourism, visitors, conventions, musical events, concerts, sporting events, of course, sometimes just to get away. Most of them don't have cars either. They are car-free. Now we're talking. If we adjust our mindset to figure how can this be a slightly easier place to get around for people who don't have cars, and we remember that the 2.3 million people who live here may not all be riding the bus, but about 40 million people might be. Makes you think, should I get another car? That comes up quite a bit. I mentioned you should get another car. I mean, you should get a car. No. I'd rather be on the move on the global scale. I'd rather be traveling. I'd rather spend my time and attention and so on getting back into the friendly skies and not trying to get to the other side of town. That's a challenge, but it shouldn't be the same sort of challenge. Owning another car is not on the list for me. But I would not be above a work from home, like mobile thing, a mobile domicile of some sort, home, temporary, like a small, I think it's a Wegman. I think it's it's an Italian company, I believe. They make some pretty cool American legal recently, smaller mobile home vehicles. That would be kind of fun. Although I'm more interested in taking a train, the Zephyr, for example, across the United States, just to see how that would go. So I don't really feel the need to drive, as I once did, straight through, when I can jump on a train, take in the sights, take a nap. Fun fact, taking a nap while you're driving a car, not as good an idea. I think in our ownership-free future, when more people will be not even renting or leasing a car, but borrowing a car or having one come and pick them up with or without a driver, it seems more likely that we won't have to have this question answered so much. I think unless you have I think you will be not necessarily the general case if you need to have a car for your job, if you're in a trade that needs a truck with tools and so on. Ideally, our smart city will cater to the needs of the people, get them to work and school and so on, and home safely, and not have to spend so much time and frustration on vehicle crimes, like I said, not to mention injury and death from impact of various kinds, whether it's car person, car building happens. It would be fun, I think, if there were fewer cases. I know this is too soon, but there was a recent carjacking person who, killed people. Not that the cars were the cause of that, but cars show up in a lot of unhappy stories in the Vegas area. It's really unfortunate. So I think I would like to continue my path on the pedestrian side and not jump back into the street with the cars so soon. I would like to travel with intention across the street or around the world, and I think that is a thing. So planning and effort are not bad things. When you have to plan for when the train will get there, what the intersecting routes are, when you're planning a multi-vehicle, I guess, multi-service. Do I have to catch a transfer bus? What do I need to do that? Knowing these things and how the city functions or intercity. It's interesting, and it has been interesting. So I'm saying that from experience. It is actually worth the effort to try to figure out that train schedule, that goofy, multicolored tube map, which has made an appearance in other cities. The crime around vehicles is just not worth it to me. So I think having a car, the opportunity cost, the value proposition, these things really, really don't appeal when you consider how often catastrophic vehicle theft. I mean, just the other day, someone's car got stolen. They put out a plea on Nextdoor because that's where car thieves hang out. I just want the pictures of my child. You keep the car. I just want the pictures that were in the folder or whatever it was. Obviously don't leave that stuff in your car, but how frustrating is that? And it's so pleasant if I ever hear a car alarm going off, which I think people they've given up on that. I never hear car alarms anymore. I never have to worry if it was my car. And I mentioned my Jetta got broken into. I did hear my car alarm. I was visiting someone in their home, and it was down the street of a residential area in San Jose. Say what you will. That sinking feeling when you're like, that kind of sounds like my car horn. Hey, I'm going to go look real quick. Oh, those are my blinking lights. So yeah, not something I feel the need to jump back into literally. I don't rely on a vehicle for work. The cost of vehicle ownership, the costs far outweigh the utility. The ends don't justify the means. I will tell you very quickly, very briefly, I suppose, the fatal car crash in County Kildare in Ireland, going from Limerick to Dublin. I caught a lift. Don't catch a ride in Vegas. I mean, don't catch a ride in Ireland. That's a different thing. You could catch that ride in Vegas, and although it is not legal in Clark County. Caught a lift with a colleague from a vendor that was in Limerick. He said, "Hey, I'm going back to Dublin. You want to join?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I was in the passenger seat in his car. We were speaking of flying, actually. He's a pilot, general aviation pilot. So we were just talking about airplanes and so on. One of the Garda police vehicles on the freeway on the M7 started doing a snake-like multi-lane maneuver, which is designed intuitively to slow down traffic. So we both noticed, it looks like they're trying to, maybe something's up ahead or something. Well, and I was completely unfamiliar with the road, of course. So I'm in the passenger seat, which is on the left, because Ireland drives on the proper side of the road. So we're on the freeway. It doesn't matter. You're all going the same direction. So I'm in a 2-lane M7. We're in the right lane. I don't know if they number them the same. We're in the right lane. The Garda is weaving back and forth, slowing us down. I see out of the corner of my eye to the left that a vehicle is coming up fast, and another vehicle hits that vehicle, and then a Garda was coming up behind those vehicles. So the vehicle that was hit turns out to have had a lone woman, young woman driving. I didn't review the details if she was ejected. I do recall that there was grave concern that the child seat in the back seat of the vehicle had no child in it, and they were concerned that the child was ejected, but that was not the case. But she was a nanny. It was an extremely sad case, a well-loved person, wrong place, wrong time. The Garda were chasing a car, which I think had 5 people in it. The details are in the article. The learning experience, I suppose, the thing that bolsters my case. We departed the scene. The Garda waved us through, you can clear the area, because they had to contend with the unfortunate series of events. the Garda were chasing these criminals. I believe they had blown through a toll booth, and they were also implicated in some other crimes, which I guess they had committed. So they were essentially in a getaway car. And this woman had just gotten on the freeway on the M7, and very, very strange experience, which I'll get to in a moment. But so she was merging on from the left, and the Garda was chasing this car. The car would have passed us on our left, in the left lane, but for this car merging in. So there was nowhere for the car to go. Very easily could have hit the car that I was in. I was leaving Ireland like 2 or 3 days later. So it was in the news that what had happened, and, give us a call if you have any information. And I spoke to the driver of the car, and he said, well, I've already given my statements. And I said, well, I don't really know what I have to add, and I'm leaving, so I wouldn't be able to follow up. I won't be here for any proceedings. But I figured, well, I can at least tell my story. So I had one of the Gardas show up at the hotel, the North Star, of course. We sat in a lovely sitting room. I really like that hotel. It has a lot of character. The neighborhood is a little dodgy, but where isn't? And it was really interesting. I essentially sat in a chair and kind of rolled back a few days earlier. And there were details that I was not familiar with because I had never driven a car on the M7. I said, I have a feeling there was like maybe were we under an overpass? The lighting was very strange, and the smell of the car, like the oil and antifreeze, once the car was struck, all these fluids went flying, and so the smell was very memorable. And again, we were under an overpass when this happened, so I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't one of the things I captured as a specific memory, but episodically, I recalled those indicators. So as I was recounting it, the Garda doing the multi-lane swish to slow down the traffic, and how the car came up very quickly, and so I just told that story. They did. I mean, there wasn't really much of a contested case when it did eventually hit the courts in Ireland. The driver of the vehicle I was in essentially did all the necessary testifying. But it was an interesting experience to recall this. You're in a completely foreign place. None of this makes any sense at the time. It happened so quickly. But I shudder to think what I would have done if I were driving the car and saw this unfolding, because I would not have been able to completely, reflexively maneuver as I would if I were driving in a more familiar setting. My own car on a street I was familiar with. So in that instance, while, of course, obviously, I'm not suggesting it's not a bad or an awful thing, I am glad that I was not driving any car. And I only laugh there because it's painfully obvious that it would have gone much worse. I imagine. When I travel to places where the driving takes place on the other side of the road, I often do a little mental exercise. What would I have done at that intersection or at that driveway or so on? And I will say, just from reflex, now actually driving would probably be a different story, but just what I would have done reflexively from, normal day-to-day driving on the right side of the road, I would have made many mistakes. So I'm very glad that I did not add to the difficulties on that night. But yes, once again, a very, very, very unfortunate series of events, and educational. So there you go. There's my carefree life in Vegas. I wish, if anybody wants to get me anything for my birthday, it's in June. I wish there was a better public transit system here. I will tell you my size if you need it, but we need better routing, better software tools, on-schedule performance. The list goes on. We'll work on the Open Transit project. That's a different episode of Let's Innovate for Vegas. At some point, you can give it a listen. I've already done at least 1 or 2 episodes on that. But not having a car in Vegas. It can be done. You must pay attention, and you must be patient. And these are both not bad things. And there's always Lyft. And you can always rent a car. I always tell people, I can rent a car. I rented a U-Haul to move. It's not like I'm anti-car. I'm just anti all the negativities about having a car here. So there you go. Thank you for listening, as always. And again, if you want to throw some tip in the tip jar for coffee, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. I do not like the Buy Me a Coffee website. So while that will remain, I got to figure out how to make it work a little bit better for me. I am not monetizing this platform, so to speak. So I'm not pushing the Buy Me a Coffee platform as a way to pay bills, although I will buy a coffee for real if you do that. But I'm also using it as a way to kind of publish everything in one place, a one-pager, quick rundown on the state of affairs of various projects. You can check that out. We'll see if we can get Hugo Floss back up online. Hugo Floss, inspired by Mental Floss, and also Hugo Boss, Hugo Floss. That was a podcast with myself and my mom, and we were doing it more in the pandemic times. And when my dad was recovering at home, we had a lot of time on our hands, and we used to talk on the phone anyway, so we figured, well, make a podcast. So we'll see if we can bring that back. But I do produce 4 audio programs every week. This is one, FFS Talk, Cafe Genius Impresarios, and Let's Innovate for Vegas. If you'd like to give any of those a try, they are linked on the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Happy New Year. Let's keep it safe. Let's keep the shiny side up, as they say. And please, if you see me walking on the sidewalk, that's mine. Don't hit me. Take care.